himself. Notice in verse 13 of Acts chapter 8, right? Even Simon believed and was baptized.
Simon Sorcerer's a really good example of this because it's very clear when you read Acts chapter 8 that Simon was saved. Nowhere does he say, I'm going to build my churches. Sometimes it's really hard, but you just can't quit. You got to keep going. And that's what Christianity is all about, is to keep going.
And the New Testament is that by which we will be judged. Now these were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word of God with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to find out if these things were so. Join us as we look into the inspired text of King Jesus with the same desire and approach to discover the will of God with Berean spirits. Welcome back to another episode of Berean Spirits on Facebook and I don't know, anywhere else. Our website, maybe, BereanSpirits.com. Is it there? It should be. Check it out, BereanSpirits.com. And you can find out more information about all the guys who are on here working. And
Chris,
yes,
we're getting sound problems.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
I can hear him.
He's coming. Say something again, Chris.
Yes, sir. Hello.
Okay, keep going. I guess I messed up. It sounded odd to me.
Oh, yeah?
It did to me as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not sure. But we are here, and it's raining. I tell you what, I've had some internet issues. Every time it rains, it seems like I get internet issues, and it has been just downpours this morning here in our area. And so, if I go out, if you guys lose me, Richard, you can finish up the program. So just a good warning there. But anyway, my name is Chris Peltz. I'm the evangelist with the Southside Church of Christ, and interrupting me as he usually does, Richard Dotson with the Kearney Church of Christ. No, I understand. It's all good. Richard, how you doing though?
I'm good. Just trying to give just want to make it where people can hear us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Hope it's all good. We've got Craig from the Lake of the Ozarks Church of Christ. Craig, how you doing?
Peachy as always.
Yeah. Is it rainy up there?
We're getting a little bit of a sprinkle.
Yeah.
My internet's always bad, though. It has nothing to do with the rain.
Yeah, I got you. We got Josh Thornhill with the Brookmead Church of Christ in Johnson City, Tennessee. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We don't have rain, but we kind of have a fluctuation of temperatures. It was in the 30s yesterday morning, got up to 70. So,
oh wow,
we're getting all the seasons in this week.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Absolutely. Matt Hodge with the Brentwood. Yeah, that's it. Brentwood Church of Christ in Marshfield, Missouri. Matt, how are you, man?
I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Doing great.
Yeah, glad to hear it. Well, guys, we're going to be talking about assembling together and the benefits of assembling together this morning, because this is something that there's been several surveys done, and the idea that there are those who have in these surveys, in fact, more than half who have been surveyed have said that they probably will not return to in-person assembling with the churches that they attend. And granted, this is a survey of folks who are in a large span of various religious groups, denominations, non-denominational churches, but nevertheless, out of the it was nearly 70% said that they probably will not return to in-person meeting, and that's unfortunate because of several things. First of all, what the scriptures actually teach concerning assembling together in one place, 1 Corinthians 11, verses 17 through 23. But also, there are several benefits that I think are going to be missed. Well, I know will be missed, both for them and for others who would be assembling, and without them there. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to get into these benefits because this is something that I think a lot of people, they miss out. And then it's interesting because then they'll go and they'll complain and they'll whine, and end up falling away altogether because they're not getting what they need. They're not getting what they should be getting, and they would be getting if they were assembling together. And they seem to miss that altogether. So Josh, I want to start with you. I know you guys are meeting again, that you guys are meeting in person where you guys are. I don't know if if you're back to both, Sunday morning, Sunday evening, or just Wednesdays, and Wednesdays, what your exact schedule is. But when you look at the scriptures and the benefits that we have, what are some of the things that come to your mind?
First of all, we've been meeting regular schedule since May of last year. So we've been meeting every service since then. The quarantine, I'm one who lives by myself. So the quarantine was challenging in its own way, at least for me, as I'm sure it was for many people. The problem that I had was, we weren't meeting on Sunday and Wednesday. And so it was a very difficult thing for me to be fed. I would always tune in and watch other assemblies that I could find on the internet. But there was something missing. There was something that just wasn't there that I didn't get by not being with people. I'm a very social person. I seem to lean more towards the extroverted side. And so I thrive on being with other people. And so when I can't be with other people, there's a big challenge to me. I think in terms of what God has given in terms of the church, I think we see God's wisdom there because we need each other. And I don't think we can overstate that. We need each other. We need our brethren. And I want to look at in the book of Hebrews, you have these brethren who are contemplating leaving their faith. They're wanting to turn away from Christ altogether to avoid persecutions and trials. And the author of Hebrews in chapter 3, he says, exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. And the point that he's making there is, I know it's hard, I know it's tough, but lean on each other, but rely on each other. And then in chapter 10, he says in verse 24, stir one another up in order to love and good works. And then in verse 25, he talks about not forsaking the assembling of yourselves. But we see God's wisdom. We need other people to help us, to lift us up, to keep us going when we find that we fall short, when we find that we're empty. There was the past couple of weeks with various things that have been going on. I've had times where I felt empty, and I've had times where, I just felt like I'd just being on my own and nobody to lift me up. But then I go and gather with God's people, and seemingly every time I feel like I'm always walking away with my cup being filled. Last night we had quite a few who were out due to various reasons. We have one lady recovering from knee surgery. We had a couple people out because of exposure to the COVID virus and all this. So we had a small handful of people at services last night. But despite just having a couple people there, I still walked away feeling as if my cup has been filled, feeling built up and encouraged and strengthened because we were there to worship God together, to study His Word, and it was encouraging to me. And I don't get that if I just sit on as much, if I just sit at a computer and talk. Being together is very important, and I think there's a lot of blessings and benefits that we get from being there for each other and being able to gather together in person.
Well, one thing that you mentioned there, being on a computer and just talking, and that's not even what a lot of people are doing. They're just simply listening. They're not even participating in that respect. They just kind of sit back and listen. And certainly there's some feeding taking place as far as the teaching that is going on. However, they're not interacting. And that's something that I think is unfortunate, is the interaction that God intended for his people. And so, it's not always like a Zoom meeting where you can talk, you can ask questions, you can go back and forth with individuals. A lot of times it's just listening to live streams, and that's it. And while there are benefits to live streams, what we're talking about is what you're missing out if that's all you're relying upon. Craig, where you guys are, and I think we've talked about this, and off the program, how we don't live stream our services, even though we post sermons later. But there are several reasons for that. But one of the biggest things is we don't want people to miss out. We want people to desire and want to be together in the assembly, especially on the first day of the week.
Yeah, early on, even before COVID, we were live streaming here at the Lake of the Ozarks. We probably for the last 3 years, we've done a live stream on Sunday mornings. For the most part, most of the time, we had a brief period of time where we stopped altogether. It was because one of the members here had come to me, or had called me on Saturday and said, "Hey, we're not going to be there tomorrow. We'll just watch church online." And you just kind of get the sense that people think that that's the same thing, that they're getting the same benefit from doing that. But obviously, maybe not so obviously, people aren't people aren't realizing the difference. It's kind of why we're talking today about this. But it should be obvious to us after missing a couple of weeks or a week of services. It should be obvious to us that these are not the same thing. It's different. I could sit and watch YouTube videos all day long, but it's not the same as gathering with the saints. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I would say that one of the benefits of gathering is to strengthen one another. Josh was talking about that a little bit, where he's feeling drained, and you come together and you're rebuilt. You're built back up, and that's what edification is. That's what the word means, to be built up or to build up. And you can't have that same edification without coming together. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 10 and verse 24, we're told to stir one another up for love and good works. Josh mentioned that. Also in Ephesians chapter 4, we're told to speak the truth in love with one another. In 2 Peter chapter 3, we're told to grow in grace and knowledge. How are we doing these things if we're not together? And in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, we're told to gather together, partake of the Lord's Supper, and proclaim the Lord's death. How are we doing that if we're not together doing that? There's an example in Acts chapter 18 where the saints are gathered together, and there's this man teaching. His name's Apollos. There's this man teaching, and he's not accurately teaching the words of God, the teachings of Christ, and the doctrine of Christ. And so he's taken aside. If they never gathered together, who would have taken him aside? That he would have never grown. He would have never been instructed. There's a lot of benefits to coming together. What I've seen is the kind of going the opposite direction here. What is the problem with not coming together? What I've seen with a lot of Christians is they stop coming, and then that's really just a symptom of other things going on in their life. And then you start, I guess I'm kind of more hypersensitive to it now because we have things like Facebook, and everybody's constantly connected to one another and feels like they need to share every part of every day with one another. But you kind of see the sad part of that is you kind of see Christians slowly fading. And a year ago, a Christian who spent a lot of time on Facebook discussing the scriptures, or speaking the truth in love, or just speaking and showing love for one another, How long does it take before their conversations fades away to something less productive after leaving the assembly and being refocused by other Christians on a weekly basis? I just noticed recently a friend of mine who is a Christian who has unfortunately not been attending like he should. The other day, he shared a meme or a joke that had 3 or 4 cuss words in it. I had to send him a private message. I'm like, "What are you doing? You know better than this." And it gets to the point where you just don't think about it anymore because you're not reinforced. You're not edified. You're not
Right.
brought back and built back up and refocused by other Christians.
Yeah.
And so that's a benefit that from coming together, you get refocused, you get built back up before you go back out into the world again.
Right. And I think that refocusing is important for several reasons. But Matt, one of the things that it seems to me is when we begin to rely simply upon live streams or just jumping on the internet and watching a service, that our focus is really more upon ourselves than it is upon others. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree, because why are you seeking out that live stream? Well, it's for you. In Ephesians 4, it talks about the church edifying itself in love. 1 Corinthians 14, it describes a worship service, and Paul exhorts them, let all things be done for edification. The raw truth that we're all hitting on here is that it's not a two-way interaction when you get online and listen. That's a one-way interaction. You're just receiving. I think this really ties into a false concept of church that's been around for many, many years. At some point in the corruption of the church became somewhere you went. And maybe not quite as bad, it became something you did. We're going to do church this morning. No, we're not going to do church. No, we're not going to go to church. If you're a Christian, you are the church. And if you're not there, then you're not assembled with the church. The idea of church is such a pagan concept. And that's really where we get the word itself, church, from. If you look in the etymology, where that word came from, the word in the Greek is totally unrelated to church. It's translated church, but really it's the idea of ecclesia, the idea of assembly. So the idea is that the Christians have come together for a certain purpose, right? Obviously, the worship service and the things that have been mentioned this morning. I think this is borne out when we look at the uses of church. And I think this kind of helps solidify the idea that it's not just a one-person thing that we do. In Matthew 18, there's instructions on how to deal with brethren who have differences with each other. You go to them alone, whoever you have the difference with, and then you take 2 or 3 witnesses with you, or 1 or 2 more, that you may have 2 or 3 witnesses. And then if they still won't hear you, then you bring it to the church. And so this is a group of people. Obviously, hopefully, this is not where, they went to the official church building. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with the group hearing the matter. Interesting is that same context. If we look down in verse 20 in Matthew 18, Jesus says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. So with each other's physical presence, it's just different. And everybody knows this. Right now, there is a sense in which you could say that we're together preaching the word online today, all of us preachers here on Berean Spirits. But in another very real sense, to Josh's point, we're not together, are we? We are separate, combining our digital streams to a presentation, but I can't slap any of you guys on the back. and we can talk, and that's good, but there is a component that's definitely missing there.
I'm glad you said on the back. So
instead of in the face.
Yeah,
well,
right.
I know if I did, you would turn the other cheek, Chris.
Right, there you go.
So
yeah, but and there is a lot that is missing in all of that. I mean, when we assemble together, we, as Hebrews 10 points out, we are considering one another. There is a lot that we can get out of things for ourselves, that we can be built up. But it's not just about us. It's really selfishness when we begin to think, well, I'm going to get on and get what I need, but what about considering others? What about what the others need as well? What about being a part of that, participating? That's what fellowship is participating together, sharing in common, being with one another, assembling together as a congregation of God's people. And that's where that edification, that building up by which every part does its share, Ephesians 4:15-16, that's where it's going to take place. That's how it's going to happen. And unfortunately, a lot of people are abandoning God's plan, God's will, and the Lord's church altogether. Listen, this is virtual. Virtual means not real, right? I mean, it's not reality in that respect. It's not really happening. It's in a virtual sense, and that is not what God intended. Because I know that not because this wasn't technology available in the first century. I know that because God's word lives and abides forever in spite of technology and things that come about that allow for various forms or means of going about teaching and preaching, just like using a car, to go rather than jumping on a ship, a chariot, or just merely walking. There are other means, but it doesn't change what we're doing as far as preaching the word and gathering together. The internet is a means to get the word out there, but it does not replace gathering together. Again, the word lives and abides forever. And I think that's one of the points that many people are missing when we talk about, the benefits of gathering together, is that interaction one with another. Richard, why don't you jump in here with some of your thoughts?
Well, I was thinking about through my lifetime, I've seen a move to be more and more casual. Guess I need to move myself down here. Be more and more casual with the assembly. People, when I was young, where they had church clothes. I mean, not everybody had a lot of money for nice clothes. I mean, if you had nice clothes, those were considered church clothes. And I can remember my mother ironing our church clothes on a Saturday night. And my dad had a shoebox and he would break out his church shoes. And I can still see him sitting on the couch, polishing his shoes. Everybody was getting ready for Sunday. And it was an event. You went to church. It was considered something. Nowadays, you see people coming into church wearing jeans. Some people even come in wearing shorts. Some people come in, with a big gulp Dr. Pepper Coke. I've seen that. I mean, you just see a really, real casual atmosphere. So I'm not surprised, when I see people think, hey, why even have to go? Why don't we just check in online and that'll ease our conscience? Think about this. If everybody did that, there'd be no need for a church building. You might as well sell it. Everything could just be done right there online. And that really misses out a lot of what the scriptures teach with the assembly. I think Craig had most of those. There was one thing, though, that I think he missed. I remember one time my family and we were on vacation in Colorado, and we were coming in on a Wednesday evening. We were coming back. We were in Colorado Springs, and we went to the Royal Gorge. It was a long drive, and we were hot and sweaty and sticky. And we were like, if we really rush, we can make it to church. And then the debate started. Well, do we go or not? Because it's going to be really rough. Do we do this? We were all tempted, and we decided to go. And I remember when we came out of church parking lot, everybody was like, boy, I'm glad we did this. This was so neat, and there was a reason for that. And the scriptures make it very clear, in Psalms 122 and verse 1. And, this was the Psalm of David. He said, I was glad when they said unto me, let's go into the house of the Lord. So it made him happy to go to church. And then considering the commands, like Craig brought up, we're supposed to assemble. And John 13 and verse 15 through 17 makes it very clear that the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither is he that is sent greater than he that sent him. And then if he says, if you know these things, happy are ye if you do them. And he's talking about, and specifically, that was in the context of washing the disciples' feet, but really what he's talking about is obeying the commands. And in Proverbs chapter 29, it says, he that keepeth the law, happy is he. And so when we're talking about assembling, Chris, we're talking about obeying God. Yes, God doesn't do anything without a purpose. And if he wants us to assemble, then there's a reason for that. And one big reason I think everyone needs to consider is that it's going to make you happy.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, even when there are times when you're just like, oh, man, there's a lot that's going to have to happen in order to get there, or, I'm really not feeling all that great, but then you go, and I don't mean sick, right? I mean, you just, either you're just a little bit down. There's been things happening in your life. You're a lot of stress. There's lots of things that go on and reasons why we think, maybe we won't go tonight. But then when you go, it first of all, when you put that effort into it, you are happy. You are full of joy because you recognize what you've gotten out of it. And that interaction with those around you has been beneficial in and of itself. And so that is something that I think really is valuable, and we get value out of it when we put that effort into it. I don't know if you guys can hear that rain. Wow, it is really coming down here. Woo!
Got thunder outside my window.
Yeah, that's crazy. Josh, as we, I don't want to keep getting around to the same point of all of this, but there's been a few things that have been mentioned as far as these benefits that we have. But I mean, if you're talking to someone, and maybe this is, all of you guys can speak to this a little bit in kind of winding down the program today, but what would you encourage someone to consider and think about if their consideration right now is to try and just find the things simply online and not physically assemble anymore with the saints?
Well, this might be a very roundabout way of answering that question, but I want to share a couple of things. When I was in high school, I was in the marching band, and there were a lot of times where we'd have an event that would kind of coincide with church. And I remember many times telling my band director that I'm not able to be there at such and such a time. And there were times where, we'd have a parade on Sunday afternoon. And so the band would get together and go, but I would always come late and meet them there after church. And I remember, if for those that aren't aware, my dad is a preacher as well. And I remember one day my band director, he was always okay if I said I'm going to be late or I'm not going to be there. He never made a huge deal about it. But there was a couple of times where he'd be like, "Man, your dad's the preacher. Why can't he just preach you the sermon on Monday?" As if that's the same thing. There's something missing just hearing the sermon. And to what Richard was saying, there was one particular night, it was a Friday night football game, And it just happened to coincide with our gospel meeting. And normally when that would happen, I would just miss the football game and I'd go to the gospel meeting. Well, this particular Friday night, the guy who put together our field show was going to be there to watch us and to give us some pointers and tips about what he saw. And for that reason, I wanted to be there. But my dad said no. He said, no, you're not going. No. And I was upset. I was sad that, I wanted to be there because that guy was going to be there. He's going to watch us. But my dad said no, so I couldn't go. And so afterwards, later on that night, I completely forgot about that fact. I was so glad that I was there to worship with God's people. It was joyful to me to be able to be there and to worship together. And so I was thankful for that. And so kind of getting back around to Chris's point here, as I mentioned earlier, I live by myself. I live over 2,000 miles away from my parents. And the closest family that I have to me is about 4.5 hours away from me. So I literally live by myself. No family around. And I say that to say this, the church here is my family.
Yeah.
The church here is my family. And so I look forward to Sundays and I look forward to Wednesday nights because I get to be with my family. And so if you don't have that, something's wrong in the group that you're in. You need to get to know them. You need to do whatever you have to do to be the family that God intends you to be. That's what God intends. If you remember in Ephesians 2:19, he talks about members of the household of God. We are God's family. And that's why that's one of the benefits that I have of gathering together. It's not the same when we're online, but when we're gathered together, I'm with my family and I'm always encouraged and I'm always filled up.
Absolutely. Yep. Great point. Yep. Craig, any last thoughts?
As always, yes, so many. Last thoughts, briefly though. A couple things. First of all, when you come together in person, you would have to be delusional to think that that's not different than what we're doing here. There's just so much that you miss getting together online versus getting together in person. One of those things is the same problem with text message versus phone calls. You lose a sense of the conversation. You lose a part of the emotion. You lose part of the emphasis on different things. There's a lot of times when you come together and you ask your brother, you meet your brother and you ask him, how is he doing? And he gives you an answer and usually it's, I'm doing okay. I'm doing fine. How are you doing? It's because that's the polite greeting in the United States. But in person, you can see in their eyes, you can feel not to get all wrong word of the usage of the word spiritual here, hippie spiritual, but you can feel the presence, like you can feel what's there. You can feel depression. You can feel what people are going through when you're together. That's something you can't get in a Zoom call. That's something I can't get, miles away from each other. It's just not the same. And for anyone who says it is the same, let me give you this example. I have 4 Eagles tickets. We're going to go see the Eagles perform live, or any band that you might like. But you have to pay me for the ticket. The ticket costs $150 each. And you're going to pay me for the ticket, and we're going to go watch the Eagles live. And then you pay me for the ticket, and I tell you, oh, it's a Facebook concert. You just paid me $150 to watch the Eagles live on Facebook. Is there a difference? Is there a difference between watching live on Facebook and going in person and feeling the music and feeling the presence of the crowd? Yes, there's obviously a difference. There's a difference between meeting on the internet and joining one another on the internet and assembling together to worship God. You don't have that same thing. This weekend, I had a bunch of friends down we just played cards and hung out and played music together. And then we ended up driving up to Kansas City for Sunday morning to meet with some friends of ours. But I talk to those guys weekly on the phone. I see them all the time. We're in group chats together. There was a difference between a group chat and getting together in my living room and eating meals together and singing songs together and being in one another's presence. Those two things are different. And for the Christian, for me, it is important and necessary that I gather together with my brethren, and that we worship God together, and that we be together and we encourage one another together. One side point here: the preacher needs edification too.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
When everybody is on Zoom, the preacher is the only one who doesn't get edified. We need edification too.
Yeah, and your example of the Facebook reminded me of one point, because it's an excellent point. And think about the soldier who is overseas, who the family relies on a FaceTime call, right? And so you've got the wife and the kids getting in front of a computer screen, and they're talking to the dad, the husband, who is overseas, in another country on a Zoom call. All right. How much do you think they would give up if they could change that to having him there in person? Because it's not the same, right? It isn't. It just isn't the same. And that is true when it comes to the Lord's people. And the reason I think that's a great example is not because I thought of it, but the church is the bride and Christ is the bridegroom, right? And as the church, we gather together, and it just isn't the same when we do it online. Matt, any last thoughts?
Just to chime in with that and amen it, in Acts 2:42, when the church first begins, they immediately continue steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship and the breaking of bread and in prayers. And to jump down, and verse 46, they also continue daily with one accord in the temple. We're talking on a daily basis. They decided they needed to be together and share each other's company. They were breaking bread from house to house. They ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And you know what happened? The church grew.
Yeah.
The Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. So I think that God knows that being together encourages everybody in the church.
Yep.
And I think that when we decide not to meet at the church, as you guys have kind of already alluded to, what it sets people up for is leaving the church. If you don't want or have a need to come together with each other, then you're gonna eventually walk away from church. You walk away from that spiritual food that you receive every week. You walk away from the company. You walk away from, by the way, evil company corrupts good habits. Craig talked about that in his first part. We walk away from the encouragement we receive from each other. In a very real way, in our hearts, we've already walked away from God.
Yeah.
And that's the danger here.
Yeah, great point. Richard, last thoughts?
You're muted.
Yep. Wait, we have a sound problem.
Assembling.
It sounded better that way.
I know. Assembling together is a command. So turn off the computers and get to church.
Yeah, amen. All right, folks. We really appreciate everybody tuning in. Be sure and check out BereanSpirits.com on our website. If you haven't already, here on YouTube and on our Facebook pages, be sure and subscribe, like, and share. We do appreciate that, and help us spread the word for these teachings and encouragements that we try to do. If you have questions, topics, something you want us to talk about on the program, leave us a comment. We'll be happy to deal with that and discuss that from a biblical perspective as well. And as always, remember to search the scriptures daily with Berean Spirits.